He was standing at the airline counter, passport in hand, jaw clenched, demanding answers when the agent looked up and quietly said, "Sir, you don't have any active tickets to Paris." So how did my own brother go from bragging about our family trip to being stranded in an airport because of something I did the night before? My name is Rachel Cole. I'm 29 years old. I live in a tiny apartment in San Diego, and my full-time job is making other people's travel plans run perfectly. I coordinate flights, hotels, transfers, and last-minute emergencies for executives who don't even remember my name. I used to think that was my quiet superpower, being the person who could fix anything without being seen. I didn't realize that same skill would become the sharpest weapon I ever used against my own family. The night everything shifted, I was back in Phoenix, sitting at my parents' dining table like I belonged there. My suitcase was half packed upstairs because I thought stupidly that we were all flying to Paris together in 2 days. I had been planning this trip for months, not in a casual, "oh yeah, we should go someday" way. I mean, I had actually done the work. I found the best flight combination. I juggled miles and points. I called airlines at midnight to fix seat assignments. I handled the layovers. I even chose the flexible fare class so my parents wouldn't panic if anything changed. It was the kind of planning I did for my clients every single day. Except this time, I did it for my family. And I did it because, for once, I wanted to be included. Not as the helper, not as the invisible person behind the screen, but as a daughter, a sister, part of the crew. Dinner was supposed to feel like a celebration. The table was crowded with dishes, roasted chicken, mashed potatoes, a salad no one touched. My mom had poured wine, and my dad kept glancing at the printed itinerary like it was a sacred document. My sister Emma sat across from me, scrolling through photos of outfits she wanted to wear in Paris, and my brother Logan was swirling his red wine like he was hosting a show. Logan has always had this way of taking up space. Even when he's saying something cruel, he says it like he's doing you a favor, like you should be grateful he's even acknowledging you. He cleared his throat, set his glass down, and looked directly at me. "Just so we're clear," he said, voice smooth, casual. "Make sure you're not around when we leave for Paris." At first, I didn't even understand what he meant. I blinked, waiting for the punchline, waiting for him to laugh, waiting for anyone to say, "Logan, what the hell?" But no one did. My dad nodded slowly, like Logan had just said something reasonable. "It's just not your place anymore," my dad added. I swear to you, I felt something snap inside me so cleanly it was almost quiet, like the sound of a thread breaking. No explosion, no drama, just a sudden, sharp silence in my chest. And the strangest part? On the outside, I smiled. I lifted my glass and said, "Understood." Because if I had reacted the way I wanted to, if I had thrown my napkin down or stormed out, this would have instantly become another family story. Another one of those holiday retellings, where I'm painted as too sensitive, too emotional, too dramatic. Rachel always overreacts. Rachel always makes things weird. Rachel always ruins the vibe. So instead, I stayed perfectly still. I forced my fork through the chicken on my plate, like I wasn't hearing my own brother politely uninviting me from a trip I had planned, booked, and paid for. My mom finally spoke, her voice cautious. "You okay, Rach?" I could hear it in her tone. That careful, nervous softness parents use when they sense something is wrong but don't want to name it. Like if they don't say the real words, the problem might disappear. "Fine," I said. The word came out flat. Not angry, not sad, just empty. Logan took my lack of reaction as permission to keep going. "Don't make it weird," he said, almost smiling. "It's just, this trip has been a long time coming. It's really for Mom and Dad. And you know, the immediate crew. The immediate crew." Like I had somehow been demoted from family to optional. My sister Emma looked up sharply at that. For a second, our eyes met. She didn't say anything, but her expression tightened, like she wanted to speak and didn't know how. I set my fork down carefully. "I thought I was part of the crew," I said, keeping my voice calm. "Especially since I booked everything. Logan's eyes flickered for half a second. That was the first crack. The first moment he realized I wasn't going to play dumb. Because yes, every confirmation email, every record locator, every boarding pass had my name at the top. I was the primary contact. I was the one who paid for the tickets on my card. I was the one who had access to the booking portal. And Logan knew that. My dad leaned forward, his voice slipping into that tired, diplomatic tone he always used when he wanted silence more than truth. "We appreciate your help," he said. "You know how confusing all that travel stuff is for us." I stared at him. "That's why I assumed I was coming," I said. Logan let out a small chuckle. There was no humor in it. "Rachel," he said, like I was a child being unreasonable. "Be serious. You live in another state. You've got your little travel job, your own life. We didn't want you to feel obligated." My little travel job. I swallowed a laugh not because it was funny, but because if I didn't laugh, I might have cried. Busy. Obligated. Like I hadn't spent 3 nights on hold fixing his seat assignment so he could sit closer to the aisle. "When exactly did you decide I wasn't obligated?" I asked quietly. "Before or after I spent hours on the phone getting you that layover you wanted?" My mom's lips parted like she wanted to say something, but Logan cut in fast. "Don't turn this into drama," he said. "You know I've been planning this Paris thing for years. There are expectations." Expectations. That word hit me like déjà vu. Because Logan had used that word before. 10 years ago, when I was 19, I got accepted into a summer architecture program in Paris. I had worked for it. I had stayed up nights. I had written essays until my hands cramped. I still remember the way my heart pounded when I opened the email. I was going to Paris. And Logan had stood in my bedroom doorway, arms crossed, and said, "You'd freak out over the language barrier. You don't handle stress well. Better let someone else have the spot." 2 days later, he told my parents I had cried and said I couldn't do it, that I was overwhelmed, that I had come to my senses. And my parents hugged me, relieved, and told me they were proud of me for being realistic. I never corrected them. I never told them Logan lied. I just swallowed it, like I swallowed everything else. And now here we were again. Perry. Expectations. And my brother, acting like he owned the dream. I looked at the three of them, my mom, my dad, and Logan, and something heavy settled in my chest. They weren't confused. They weren't misunderstanding. They weren't accidentally leaving me out. They were choosing it. They were choosing a version of this family where I existed as the background, the person who made reservations, the person who fixed mistakes, the person who stayed out of the way. And the truth is, when you're the one who quietly holds everything together, you also know exactly how to take it apart. That night, after dinner, I smiled through the rest of the evening. I watched them put on a travel documentary about Paris, laughing at little jokes about croissants and cafes, like nothing had happened. Then I went upstairs to my old bedroom, closed the door, and sat on the edge of the bed. My phone buzzed. A message from Logan. No emoji. No softness. No hesitation. Just instructions. "Just making sure we're clear," it read. "Don't show up at the house Wednesday morning. It'll be awkward with the car and all. We've got it covered." I stared at the screen until the words stopped being words and started being proof. Proof that I had never been seen the way I thought I was. For a moment, my brain tried to load the old script. Maybe he didn't mean it like that. Maybe I'm being dramatic. Maybe if I explain calmly. Then another thought cut through, sharp and cold. Why am I still trying to earn a place that should have been mine by default? I stood up, walked to my childhood desk, and opened my laptop. Not because I was angry. Not because I wanted revenge. But because something inside me had finally accepted the truth. If they wanted Paris without me, then they were about to find out what Paris looked like without my help. And as I logged into the booking portal, my fingers steady, my breathing slow, I realized something else. Logan thought he had just uninvited me from a trip. What he didn't understand was this. He had just handed me the power to rewrite the entire itinerary. And I wasn't sure yet what I was going to do with it. But I knew one thing for certain. This time, I wasn't going to swallow it. Not again. I didn't cancel anything that night. Not yet. After I opened my laptop and logged into the booking portal, I just sat there for a long time, with the glow of the screen lighting up my old bedroom. The room smelled faintly like dust and laundry detergent, the way childhood bedrooms always do, like a place that's been waiting for you to return, even though you never really can. Downstairs, I could still hear the travel documentary playing. My mom laughed at something the narrator said about Paris being the city of love. My dad made a small comment about how he couldn't wait to see the Louvre. And Logan sounded like he was already there, like he had already won. I stared at the reservation on my screen until my eyes blurred. 4 tickets. Phoenix to Paris. Layover in Dallas. Seats carefully arranged. Passport names spelled correctly. Every detail checked and double-checked. And right at the top, like a signature no one had bothered to notice, was my name. Primary contact, Rachel Cole. Payment method, Rachel Cole. Email delivery, Rachel Cole. It wasn't just that I had booked the trip. I had built it. I had carried it. I had made it real. And somehow, in the space of one dinner conversation, I had been demoted to a problem. The part that kept replaying in my mind wasn't even Logan's voice. It was my dad's. It's just not your place anymore. As if I'd been living in the wrong room of the house. As if my seat at the table had been temporary. As if I'd been borrowing space in my own family. I closed my laptop and pressed my palms into my eyes, trying to force my thoughts into order. A familiar reflex rose in my chest, the one I'd carried for years. Fix it. Smooth it over. Send a reasonable message. Explain calmly. Because if you explain calmly, maybe they'll understand. Maybe they'll feel bad. Maybe they'll change their minds. But another part of me, the part that had been growing quietly for a long time, whispered something else. They already understand. They just don't care. My phone buzzed again, and for a split second my heart jumped, like a dog still trained to respond to its owner's call. It was a group text. My mom had named it Family Paris Thread. A second later, photos started appearing. Emma had laid out outfits on her bed, soft sweaters, a long coat, a pair of boots she'd clearly bought for the trip. She captioned it, Paris Fits. My dad sent a photo of his printed itinerary, highlighted in yellow like he was preparing for a final exam. He wrote, We're ready. And then Logan. Logan sent a selfie with his new carry-on bag, grinning like a kid at Christmas. Underneath it he typed, Can't wait to get away from the chaos for a bit. Just us. Just us. No one corrected him. No one wrote, Rachel too. No one said, Hey, that's not what's happening. They just let it sit there. Like I had never been part of the plan in the first place. I stared at that message until my throat tightened. It wasn't the first time my family had done this quiet rewriting, this gentle erasing. They were experts at making things look clean on the surface while something rotten grew underneath. Logan had always been the loud one, the confident one, the one who knew how to speak in a way that sounded like truth. My parents had always been the ones who avoided conflict so hard they would rather let something unfair happen than admit they had failed to protect their own child. And me? I had become the person who made their avoidance easier. The fixer. The peacekeeper. The one who swallowed her feelings so everyone else could keep smiling. I didn't reply in the group chat. Instead, I opened Logan's message again. Don't show up Wednesday morning. It'll be awkward with the car and all. Awkward. That word felt like a slap. Because what he meant was, your presence will ruin the vibe. Not his cruelty. Not my dad nodding along. Not my mom sitting there, silent. No, my existence was the problem. I set my phone down and stood up, pacing the room. The carpet creaked under my feet in the same spots it had when I was 16, when I was 19, when I was 22 and came home for the last time before I moved away for good. There was a dent in the carpet where my old desk used to be. The posters were gone. My mom had replaced them with neutral wall art. A vase of fake flowers sat on the dresser like this room belonged to a guest, not a daughter. I realized something then that made my chest ache. They had redecorated my childhood. They had softened it, sanitized it, like they wanted the memory of me to be easier to manage. I picked up my phone again and opened my notes app. Without thinking, I typed a title, Things I Let Slide. I didn't plan to write much. I thought it would be 2 or 3 petty memories, and then I'd feel silly and stop. But my fingers didn't stop. Logan told Mom and Dad I cried about the Paris program when I didn't. Logan called my first apartment a phase. Logan told my last boyfriend dating me was like dating customer service without the cute uniform. Logan called my job glorified customer service. Logan told my parents I was too sensitive to handle real pressure. Logan laughed when Dad forgot my birthday, then said, "Well, she's always busy anyway." By the time I reached 12, my jaw hurt from clenching it. I stared at the list and felt something shift. It wasn't rage. It was clarity. This wasn't about Paris. Paris was just the stage. This was about the role I'd been forced to play in my family for years. The reliable background character. The one who did the work but never got the credit. The one who was expected to show up when needed and disappear when inconvenient. My phone buzzed again. This time it was a private message from Emma. "Are you okay?" Just 3 words. But they hit me harder than anything else, because Emma was the only one who had even asked. I typed back, "I'm fine. Don't worry." And then I deleted it. I stared at the blinking cursor, my thumbs hovering. What I wanted to say was, "No, I'm not okay. Your brother just told me I'm not welcome, and you watched it happen." But I didn't type that either, because I wasn't sure Emma deserved that weight. Emma had always been the quieter one, the one who avoided Logan's temper by going silent, the one who survived by staying neutral. And for a long time, I had told myself she wasn't part of the problem. But neutrality has a cost. And I was starting to realize I had paid it alone. I finally sent her something softer. "I'm just surprised. I'll talk to you later." She replied almost immediately. "I'm sorry. I didn't know what to say." I read that line over and over, because it was honest. And honesty, in my family, was rare. Downstairs, the documentary ended, and I heard the TV click off. I heard my dad moving around in the kitchen, rinsing dishes, my mom's footsteps, Logan's voice, loud and cheerful, talking about how he couldn't wait to finally do something nice without drama. Without drama. That's what they always called it when they wanted me to be silent. I sat back down at my desk and opened my laptop again. The booking portal loaded instantly, because I used it every day for work. It felt almost absurd how familiar and professional the screen looked in the middle of this emotional mess. Passenger details, fare, rules, change options, cancel button, everything was right there. It would have been so easy to click, so easy to burn it down. And for a moment, the thought of it sent a pulse of satisfaction through my chest. Not because I wanted my parents to suffer, not because I wanted to ruin a dream, but because I wanted just once for Logan to feel the consequences of treating me like I was disposable. Then guilt hit me like a wave. That would be extreme. That would be petty. That would prove them right. Rachel is vindictive. Rachel is dramatic. Rachel ruins things. I leaned back in the chair and exhaled slowly. My therapist's voice floated into my head, calm and annoyingly reasonable. "Revenge doesn't heal you, Rachel." Maybe it didn't. But neither did letting people walk all over me. Neither did swallowing every insult and calling it maturity. Neither did spending my entire life being the bigger person, while Logan stayed exactly the same. I looked at the reservation again. I looked at my name at the top, and I realized something that made my stomach flip. This trip wasn't happening because Logan planned it. It wasn't happening because my parents were brave. It was happening because I had made it happen. And if they were going to treat me like I was nothing, then maybe the trip should reflect that. My fingers moved toward the trackpad. I didn't click yet. I just hovered. And in that pause, in that thin space between what I had always done and what I might do now, I heard my brother's voice again, clear as if he were standing in the doorway. "Make sure you're not around when we leave." Fine. I wouldn't be around. Not in the driveway. Not in the car. Not in the airport terminal where they expected me to rush in and fix their problems. I would be somewhere else entirely. I would be gone before they even realized what was missing. And for the first time all night, I felt my pulse slow. Not with anger. With control. I stared at the cancel button one more time, And this time, I didn't feel like a villain. I felt like someone who had finally stopped begging for permission to exist. And that was when I made the decision. Not the decision to destroy them. The decision to stop saving them. Because there is a difference. A huge one. And they were about to learn it the hard way. I didn't sleep. Not the way people say they didn't sleep, meaning they woke up once or twice and checked the clock. I mean, I lay in my childhood bed staring at the ceiling for hours, listening to the house settle, listening to my parents move around downstairs, listening to Logan's laughter drift through the vents like it belonged there more than I did. At some point, the lights went off, doors clicked shut. The last mug clinked in the sink, silence finally arrived. But inside me, nothing was quiet. My laptop was still open on the desk across the room, the booking portal glowing softly like a secret I wasn't sure I could keep. The reservations sat there, perfectly organized, perfectly intact. 4 tickets, 1 dream trip, 1 family thread full of excitement, and 1 person who had been told, very clearly, she was not welcome. I got up and crossed the room barefoot. The carpet felt cold. I sat down again, because my body didn't know what else to do. My fingers hovered over the trackpad like I was about to touch something dangerous. And the thing is, I wasn't a reckless person. I was the opposite. I built my entire career on being careful, on thinking 10 steps ahead, on making sure nothing went wrong for other people. That's why what I did next didn't feel like a tantrum. It felt like a decision. A clean, quiet, deliberate decision. But before I could even move, my phone buzzed again. Another message. Not from the group chat. From Logan. He didn't call. He didn't knock. He didn't come upstairs like a brother who felt even a flicker of guilt. He just texted me. Just confirming. Don't be here when we leave. We're heading out at 11:15. Don't make it awkward. I stared at the screen, and my chest tightened in a way that was almost physical. Like someone had pressed a thumb into the center of my sternum. Don't make it awkward. He was still treating me like the problem, not his cruelty. Not my dad's agreement. Not my mom's silence. Me. My existence. My presence. My feelings. Presented. I set the phone down slowly, like if I moved too fast I would shatter. And then, without planning to, I started to remember everything. Not the big moments. Not the obvious ones. The small ones. The ones that build a life of being quietly diminished. Logan at my college graduation, leaning into my ear while my parents took photos and whispering, "Try not to cry in the pictures. It's embarrassing." Logan at my first real job telling my dad, "She's basically just booking flights all day. It's not that serious." Logan at a family barbecue, laughing and saying, "Rachel's the kind of person who apologizes when someone else bumps into her." And my parents, always smiling awkwardly, always changing the subject, always letting it slide because confronting Logan would be unpleasant. It was easier to ask me to be resilient. I was the safe one to disappoint. That thought made my throat burn. I stood up and paced again, the way I had in part 2, except now my pacing wasn't frantic. It was measured, controlled, like my mind was lining up facts. Logan had been doing this for years. He wasn't just rude. He wasn't just selfish. He was strategic. He knew exactly how to make me look unreasonable, while he looked calm. He knew how to deliver cruelty in a voice that sounded polite enough for my parents to tolerate. And I had let it work. Because I didn't want to be the difficult daughter. Because I wanted peace. Because I wanted to be loved. The room felt smaller the longer I stood in it. I walked over to the closet and opened it. Inside, my mom had stored extra blankets and old photo albums. I pulled one out without thinking, sat back down on the bed, and opened it. There I was at 19, smiling too big, holding an acceptance letter, my parents' arms around me, and Logan, standing behind us, smiling like he was proud. That picture made me sick. Because I remembered what happened after. I remembered the day I got accepted into that Paris architecture program. I remembered the email subject line. I remembered the way my hands shook when I read it. I was going to Paris. I wasn't rich. I wasn't fearless. But I was hungry. I was determined. I had worked for it in a way I don't think anyone in my family understood. And Logan had ruined it. Not by screaming, not by forbidding me, by planting doubt, by acting like he was protecting me. He came into my room that night, leaned against the doorway like he owned it, and said, "You're going to panic over there. The language barrier alone will break you." I told him I could handle it. He laughed, soft and condescending. "Rachel, you can barely handle Thanksgiving." He said it like a joke. And the worst part is, my parents believed him. Because Logan was confident. Logan was charismatic. Logan sounded like he knew what he was talking about. I didn't. I was just a girl who wanted something too badly. And when you want something too badly, people in your family sometimes treat it like a weakness. I remembered sitting at the kitchen table, my mom crying. "You're so far away," she whispered. "What if something happens?" My dad looked at me like he wanted to be supportive, but he didn't know how. Logan sat there, calm, arms folded, like a mediator. "You don't have to prove anything," he said. "You can do a program here. It's safer." And I remember the moment I gave in. Not because I agreed. Because I was tired. Because I couldn't stand being the reason my mom cried. So I opened my laptop and wrote the email. "Thank you for the opportunity, but I will have to decline." I hit send. And then I went into the bathroom and threw up. That was the only panic attack I had that summer. Not because of Paris. Because of what I had lost. I never told my parents. Logan lied. I never told them he had told them. I cried privately and begged to stay home. I just let the story exist. Because calling Logan out would have caused conflict. And conflict, in my family, was treated like the worst thing you could do. I closed the photo album and set it aside. My hands were shaking now. Not with fear. With something else. A kind of grief. Because I suddenly realized this trip to Paris wasn't just a vacation. It was a repetition. A replay. Logan, taking Paris away from me again, only this time with my parents' blessing. And I had spent years believing that if I became successful enough, helpful enough, calm enough, I would eventually be treated like I mattered. But here I was, 29 years old, still being told to stay out of the way. My phone buzzed again. This time it was the group chat. Logan had posted another message. Reminder. Passports, chargers, and don't forget the neck pillows. Tomorrow is going to be legendary. Legendary. I stared at the screen and felt a slow, dangerous calm settle over me. Because Logan wasn't nervous. He wasn't worried. He wasn't even considering the possibility that something could go wrong. He felt safe. Safe because I had built the safety net. Safe because I had always been there to fix things. Safe because my entire role in the family was to make sure no one else ever felt consequences. And suddenly, I saw the truth so clearly it almost made me laugh. Logan wasn't afraid of me being dramatic. He was afraid of me being powerful. That's why he always made my job sound small. That's why he always mocked my competence. Because if he admitted I was capable, he would have to admit I had power. And if I had power, he couldn't control the narrative. I opened my laptop again. The booking portal was still there. I clicked into the fare rules again. Not because I needed to check them, but because I needed to feel grounded in something real. Flexible ticket class. Free changes. Cancellation allowed. Refund to original payment method. Everything was clear. Everything was legal. Everything was within the system. This wasn't sabotage. This was me reclaiming what I had paid for. I sat there for a long moment, staring at the list of passengers. Mom, Dad, Emma, Logan, and then me, Rachel Cole. The name Logan wanted to erase. I thought about my mom's excited smile earlier that night. I thought about my dad highlighting the itinerary like he was a kid preparing for his first field trip. And guilt rose again, sharp and painful. They didn't deserve to be punished. Not like this. Not for Logan's cruelty. But then another memory surfaced, one that made my guilt turn into something heavier. My dad nodding at the table. "It's just not your place anymore." My mom asking if I was okay, and then letting it go. They weren't innocent. They weren't evil, but they were complicit. And complicit still hurts. I looked at the clock. 2:48 m. In less than 9 hours, they would be waking up, buzzing with excitement, loading suitcases into the car, leaving me behind like I was an inconvenience they had finally managed out of the picture. And the worst part? They would do it without hesitation, without looking back, without wondering if I was crying upstairs. I realized then that I had two choices. I could do what I had always done, swallow the humiliation, let them go, and pretend it didn't matter. Or I could do something I had never done before. I could let them feel it. Not my anger, not my yelling, not my tears, but the simple, undeniable consequences of treating me like I was disposable. I rested my hand on the trackpad. My breathing was steady now. My mind was clear. And in that quiet, I understood something that felt like a truth I had been avoiding for years. Paris wasn't the thing I was fighting for. I was fighting for the version of myself who had been talked out of it at 19. The girl who had given up her dream because she didn't want to make anyone uncomfortable. The girl who had apologized for wanting more. This time, I wasn't going to be that girl. Not again. I didn't click yet. Not in that moment. But I knew I was going to. And once I did, there would be no going back. By 3 a.m., the house was completely still. No documentary voices downstairs. No clinking dishes. No footsteps. Just the low hum of the air conditioner and the occasional creak of the walls settling, like the house itself was trying to get comfortable while I stayed wide awake in a body that didn't know how to rest. I sat at my childhood desk with my laptop open, the booking portal still pulled up, my name glowing at the top of the reservation like a dare. Primary contact: Rachel Cole. Payment: Rachel Cole. It was such a small detail. The kind of detail no one in my family ever paid attention to. To them, travel just happened. Flights appeared. Hotels were ready. Boarding passes showed up. Problems were solved before they became problems. They never saw the invisible work underneath. And I had built my entire life around being invisible. I stared at the passenger list again. Mom, Dad, Emma, Logan, Rachel. 4 names that felt like a family. 1 name that felt like a liability. The cursor hovered near the Manage Booking options. I could cancel. I could change. I could reissue. I could reroute. I could do what I did for clients every day without even thinking. And still, I didn't click. Because there was a difference between having power and using it. I leaned back in the chair and pressed my fingers to my forehead. The strangest part was that I wasn't shaking anymore. The first few hours after dinner, my emotions had been loud hurt, humiliation, anger, disbelief. But now, at this hour, the feelings had settled into something quieter, something colder, something almost organized. Like my mind was finally sorting the truth into neat folders. Logan had uninvited me. My parents had agreed. Emma had stayed silent. And all of them had been perfectly comfortable letting me do the work anyway. I picked up my phone and scrolled through the family Paris thread again, like I was looking for evidence in a case I already knew the outcome of. My mom's excited messages, my dad's itinerary, Emma's outfits, Logan's smug selfie, and then his words. Just us. The part that hurt most wasn't the exclusion, it was the certainty. Logan spoke like I wasn't even an option, like he had already edited me out of the story and everyone else had nodded along. I clicked out of the thread and opened my notes again. Things I let slide. The list stared back at me like a confession. And at the bottom, the last line I had typed earlier. 13. I never made him feel it. I always took the hit. I read that line over and over until my throat tightened. Because it was true. Every time Logan belittled me, I swallowed it. Every time my parents minimized it, I let them. Every time Emma looked away, I pretended she didn't. I had spent years being the bigger person, and somehow that had turned into permission for them to keep treating me smaller. I reached for my water bottle and took a sip. My hands were steady. That scared me a little. I reopened the booking portal and clicked into the fare details. Not because I needed to. I already knew them. I had chosen this ticket class on purpose months ago, thinking it would protect my parents from stress. Flexible fare, free changes within the window, cancelable, refundable to original form of payment. The system didn't care about family dynamics. The system cared about rules. And according to the rules, the tickets belonged to me. I could almost hear my therapist again. calm and firm. Rachel, you don't have to prove your worth by overfunctioning. Overfunctioning. That word had annoyed me the first time she said it. Because I wasn't overfunctioning. I was just functioning. I was being responsible. I was being helpful. But now I saw what she meant. I had been doing too much for people who did too little for me. And I had been calling it love. I clicked into the cancel reservation screen. A warning popped up. Are you sure you want to cancel these flights? Refund will be issued to the original payment method. I stared at the warning. I could still back out. I could still close the laptop, go to bed, wake up, smile, wave goodbye, and then spend the next week pretending I wasn't crushed. I could do the mature thing. The thing my family always praised me for. The thing that kept me quiet. But then I imagined Wednesday morning. Logan in his blazer, rolling his suitcase like he was the main character. My mom fussing over neck pillows. My dad checking passports 5 times. Emma holding her phone, taking photos, trying to pretend she wasn't uncomfortable. And me? Me sitting in the house alone, listening to their car pull away, staring at my phone like a dog waiting for someone to come back. And then, a few hours later, the first text would arrive. Rachel, the boarding pass won't load. Or, Rachel, the airline says we need to recheck in. Or, Rachel, can you call them? They're not listening to us. Because that was the part Logan didn't understand. Even when I wasn't invited, I was still expected to be available. I wasn't family. I was tech support. I was the emergency contact. I was the person who made sure Logan never had to feel stupid in public. And suddenly, something in me hardened. Not into cruelty. Into boundaries. I sat there for a long time, breathing slowly, looking at the passenger list. Mom, Dad, Emma, Logan. I loved my parents. I did. And that was the problem. Because love makes you hesitate, even when someone hurts you. Love makes you question your own reality. Love makes you feel guilty for defending yourself. But then I remembered my dad's voice at the table. It's just not your place anymore. And I remembered my mom's silence. And I remembered the way Emma had looked at her phone instead of looking at me. They weren't monsters, but they were choosing comfort over me. And if they were allowed to choose, then so was I. I clicked cancel, and then stopped again. My heart thumped once, hard. I wasn't afraid of the airline rules. I wasn't afraid of the money. I was afraid of the identity shift. Because if I did this, I wouldn't be Rachel the fixer anymore. I would be Rachel who finally said no. And I didn't know who that version of me was. I swallowed. Then I did something new, something that wasn't in the original plan. I opened another tab and searched for flights from Phoenix to Paris for the same day. Different terminals, different routes. Because if I was going to do this, I wasn't going to stay behind. I wasn't going to punish them and then sit in my childhood bedroom crying. No. If Logan wanted Paris without me, I was going to give him exactly that. And I was going to take Paris for myself. I found an itinerary with an earlier departure and a connection through Chicago. It was slightly longer, but it gave me one thing that mattered more than convenience: distance. A separate terminal. A separate timeline. A way to disappear before they even realized the floor had shifted beneath them. I stared at the screen, then back at the cancel page. My fingers hovered. And then, as if my body had finally made peace with what my mind already knew, I moved. First, I canceled Logan's ticket. Not because I hated him the most, though I did hate him in that moment, but because he was the one who had spoken the words. He was the one who had made the decision out loud. He was the one who had treated me like a disposable assistant. The system processed it with a cheerful spinning icon. Canceling. Then it confirmed. Ticket canceled. Refund issued to original payment method. My stomach flipped. I sat perfectly still. For a second, I thought I might throw up, but instead, I felt something else. Relief. A clean, sharp relief. Like the air in the room had finally changed. I canceled my dad's ticket next. Then my mom's. Each click felt heavier than the last. Not because I didn't mean it, because I did, but because I knew this would hurt them. And I wasn't someone who liked hurting people. Even people who hurt me. Then, I paused over Emma's name. My finger froze. Because Emma wasn't Logan. Emma hadn't spoken. Emma hadn't defended me either, but she also hadn't been cruel. She was just quiet. And quiet, in my family, was how you survived. I stared at her name for a long moment. Then I canceled it too, not out of spite, but because Emma was part of the same booking, the same crew that had let me be erased. And because if Emma was going to learn anything from this, she had to see it clearly, not as a vague family tension, but as consequences. I sat back and stared at the screen. The reservation was gone. Their trip was gone. And in its place was a series of confirmation emails landing in my inbox, one after another, like the sound of dominoes falling. Then I rebooked myself. New itinerary. Earlier departure. Different terminal. I upgraded my seat using miles I had earned booking flights for clients who didn't know my name, and for a brother who had told me I didn't belong. When my final confirmation arrived, I stared at it until my eyes burned. This was it. The line I could never uncross. I closed my laptop, held it against my chest for a second, and whispered into the dark. You wanted Paris without me. Let's see how that works out. And then, for the first time all night, I lay down. Not because I felt peaceful, but because the decision was made. And now, the only thing left was to watch what happened when my family discovered they had been traveling on my kindness all along. When I finally closed my laptop, the room felt different. Not lighter, not peaceful, just irreversible. I lay back on my childhood bed and stared into the dark, listening to the quiet hum of the house. My heart still thudded, but it wasn't racing anymore. It was slow and heavy, like it was trying to adjust to a new gravity. I told myself I would sleep. I didn't. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the same images on repeat: my mom's excited smile, my dad's highlighted itinerary, Emma's outfits laid out on her bed, Logan's smug face at the dinner table. And then I saw something else too. Logan, at the airport counter, voice raised, demanding a manager. Because I knew him, I knew exactly how he handled embarrassment. He didn't absorb it. He threw it at someone else. I rolled onto my side and pulled my phone out from under my pillow. The screen lit up the room in a cold glow. No new messages, no calls. Of course not. They were asleep, dreaming about croissants and Eiffel Tower photos. I was the only one awake in a house full of people who had already decided I didn't matter. That thought should have broken me. Instead, it made me feel strangely steady, because the truth was, the worst part had already happened. The worst part wasn't the consequences that were coming. The worst part was the moment at the dinner table when my own family looked at me and decided I was optional. Everything after that was just math. Around 5 a.m., I got up and quietly pulled my second suitcase out from under the bed. I had packed it earlier in the week, back in San Diego, because I'd assumed I was going to Paris with them. It was still half full of things I'd chosen for: family photos, sweaters I thought my mom would compliment, shoes I could walk in all day without complaining, a scarf I bought because Emma said it looked French. Now I repacked it differently. Not for them. For me. I folded my clothes carefully, but not because I was trying to be perfect. I folded them because it gave my hands something to do, while my mind ran through the schedule. My flight, 1:30 p.m. Their flight, 3:10 p.m. Different terminals, different connections. Same destination, a shadow trip layered underneath theirs. I had built it that way on purpose. And yes, part of me knew that was dramatic, but it was the kind of drama that stayed quiet. The kind of drama no one could accuse you of, because it happened inside a system they didn't understand. I checked my confirmation again. Seat upgrade confirmed. Boarding group early. Connection through Chicago. Enough time to clear security without stress. The irony was almost painful. I had given myself the exact travel experience I had spent years giving other people. Smooth, controlled, predictable. The kind of trip Logan thought he deserved by default. I zipped my suitcase, slid it back under the bed, and went to the bathroom. When I looked in the mirror, I didn't recognize my own face at first. I looked calm, not happy, not glowing, but calm in a way I hadn't felt in years. Like I had finally stopped bracing for impact. I brushed my teeth quietly, washed my face, and then stood there for a moment with my hands on the sink, breathing. And that was when the guilt tried to come back. Because guilt is loyal. Guilt shows up like a dog that always returns, no matter how many times you push it away. I thought about my mom. She had been excited in a way I hadn't seen in years. My mom didn't do big dreams anymore. She did routines. She did grocery lists. She did keeping the peace. Paris had lit her up. I thought about my dad. My dad wasn't cruel like Logan. My dad was passive. He loved in a way that always took the path of least resistance. But he still loved. And I was about to embarrass them in public. I was about to take their dream trip and turn it into an airport disaster. My throat tightened. For a second, I almost went back to my room. Almost opened the laptop. Almost clicked undo. And then I remembered something. Not a big dramatic memory. A small one. A year ago, when I got promoted at work. It wasn't a huge promotion, but it mattered to me. I had called my parents to tell them, my voice bright, my heart open. My mom said, "That's nice, honey." My dad said, "Good job." And then Logan laughed in the background and said, "So you're like, senior flight attendant now?" And they all chuckled. Even my dad, even my mom. And I remember standing in my kitchen in San Diego, phone pressed to my ear, smiling too hard while something inside me collapsed. That was the moment I realized. They didn't just underestimate me, they enjoyed it. It made them comfortable. It made Logan comfortable to keep me smaller. And my parents had learned to laugh along because it was easier than stopping him. I exhaled slowly and turned off the bathroom light. No, I wasn't undoing anything. Not this time. Morning arrived wrapped in desert sunlight and fake normalcy. By 7 a.m., the house was stirring. I heard cabinet doors, the coffee machine, the low murmur of my parents talking. The scent of toast drifted upstairs. Then a soft knock on my bedroom door. "Rachel?" my mom called gently. "You awake?" I shoved my suitcase farther under the bed with my foot and opened the door wearing a t-shirt and leggings, hair pulled into a messy bun. I made myself look as unprepared as possible. "Yeah," I said, rubbing my eyes. "You guys leaving soon?" My mom smiled, and for a second, I saw the version of her from old vacation photos. The younger one. The one who used to laugh loudly and take spontaneous pictures. "Your brother wants to get to the airport early," she said. "You know how he is, overprepared." Overprepared. The irony nearly made me choke. Because Logan wasn't overprepared. He was overconfident. He thought preparation was something you bought like a carry-on, like a blazer, like a printed itinerary. He didn't understand the real preparation lived in the background. In the emails. In the hold times. In the portal logins. In the person he had just told to stay home. I followed my mom downstairs. The house buzzed with departure energy. Suitcases lined up by the door. Passports on the counter. My dad muttering names under his breath like a spell. Cole, okay, we've got them." Emma sat at the table with her coffee mug, staring into it like she was trying to read the future in the dark liquid. She glanced up at me and her eyes held mine for a beat longer than normal. I knew she was thinking about the dinner. About Logan's words. About the fact that I was still here. Still smiling. Still acting normal. Logan came in last, of course. He was wearing a navy blazer, jeans, and sneakers, like he was auditioning for a European lifestyle commercial. His suitcase rolled behind him like a prop. He looked energized, excited, proud. Like he had personally earned this trip. He clapped his hands once. "All right," he announced. "Paris crew, let's roll." Then he looked directly at me. "Remember," he said casually, like he was reminding me to take out the trash. "Don't be here at 11. We don't want to trip over you on the way out. The cab's going to be packed." My mom didn't correct him. My dad didn't flinch. Emma's jaw tightened. I leaned against the doorway and nodded. "Don't worry," I said. "I won't be." The words tasted strange in my mouth, because I meant them in a way Logan didn't understand. Emma stood up slowly and walked past me like she was heading to refill her coffee. As she passed, she whispered, so quietly, I barely heard it. "You sure you're okay?" I looked at her. Really looked. And for a second, I saw the younger version of us sharing a bedroom, whispering about all the places we would go someday. I saw the girl who used to hold my hand when Logan got mean. I will be, I whispered back. I didn't say how. I didn't say when. I didn't say what was coming. My dad wrestled suitcases into the trunk. My mom fussed with a neck pillow. Logan checked his phone like a man who believed the universe worked for him. And then, just before they left, my mom came over and hugged me. It was a quick hug. A polite hug. The kind you give someone you're not sure you've hurt. Text us, she said softly. Okay? I nodded. Have fun, I said. And I meant it. Because part of me still loved them. That was the tragedy. At 11:15, they pulled away. My mom waved from the back seat, pressing her hand to the window like she always did. My dad stared forward, focused on directions. Logan was already typing something on his phone, probably posting about airport days and Paris energy. The car turned the corner and disappeared. The sound of the engine faded. And the moment the driveway went quiet, my entire body changed. My smile dropped. My shoulders lowered. I walked back into the house, shut the door, and stood there in the silence. Not empty silence. Open silence. Like the space of my life had finally been cleared. I went upstairs, pulled my suitcase out from under the bed, and zipped it the rest of the way. Then I grabbed my backpack, checked my boarding pass one more time, and called a rideshare. As the little car icon crawled toward the house on my screen, I felt something unexpected rise in my chest. Not excitement, not victory, something steadier, a kind of quiet dignity. Because for once, I wasn't waiting to be chosen. I was leaving on my own terms. And somewhere across town, my brother still thought he had successfully erased me from the trip. He had no idea that in a few hours, he'd be standing at an airline counter, demanding that someone fix what had been broken. And this time, it wouldn't be me. The rideshare pulled up in front of the house less than 8 minutes after I requested it. A small gray sedan, clean but forgettable, the kind of car that didn't ask questions. The driver stepped out, popped the trunk, and smiled at me like I was just another traveler heading toward something exciting. I didn't look exciting. I looked like a woman trying to keep her entire nervous system from collapsing. I slid my suitcase into the trunk, thanked him, and climbed into the back seat. As the car rolled away from my parents' driveway, I watched the house shrink in the rearview mirror. It felt strange leaving it like that. Not in a dramatic, movie scene way. More like leaving a version of myself behind. The version that still believed she could earn her place in that family if she just stayed calm enough, helpful enough, small enough. The driver glanced at me through the mirror. Heading to the airport, he asked. Yeah, I said, and my voice came out steadier than I expected. Vacation? I hesitated. Because the honest answer was complicated. Yes, I finally said. Something like that. He chuckled, the way strangers do when they sense you don't want to explain. Nice. Where you headed? Paris. His eyebrows lifted. Ooh, fancy. He paused, then added. Going with family? I looked out the window at the desert streets sliding past, sunlit and ordinary. Not exactly, I said, and that was the truest sentence I'd spoken all week. On the drive, he made small talk about airports and travel. About how people always looked lighter when they were headed somewhere new. He told me he'd never been out of the country, but Paris was on his list. He said he'd heard the food alone was worth it. I nodded and smiled at the right places, but my mind was elsewhere. It kept flickering back to my phone, to the group chat, to the moment when Logan would realize. Because even though I had canceled the tickets, even though the system had processed the refunds, even though the confirmation emails were sitting safely in my inbox, Logan still didn't know. And part of me, this darker, quieter part, was waiting for the sound of the impact. Not because I enjoyed chaos, because I wanted the truth to finally be undeniable. We reached the airport, and the driver pulled up to the curb. As I stepped out, the air hit me with that familiar airport smell: hot concrete, fuel, and something faintly metallic. I grabbed my suitcase from the trunk, thanked him again, and walked toward the sliding doors. The moment I stepped inside, my body shifted into muscle memory. Airports were my natural habitat. Even when I wasn't traveling, I lived in them mentally. I spoke their language. I understood their rhythms. I knew where the delays hid and where the shortcuts were. For years, airports had been where I fixed other people's mistakes. Now, for the first time, I was moving through one for myself. I checked in at a kiosk, printed my bag tag, and watched the little sticker curl out like a receipt for a new life. Rachel Cole. Destination: Paris. The letters looked unreal. I dropped my bag at the counter and the agent smiled politely. "Have a great trip." "Thank you," I said, and my voice almost caught. Because she had no idea. To her, I was just a woman going to Paris. She didn't know I was a woman who had just detonated the emotional foundation of her family. I walked toward security. Shoes off. Laptop out. Liquids in the bin. Everything smooth. Everything familiar. As I stepped through the scanner and collected my things, I felt something I hadn't expected. Peace. Not happiness. Not joy. But peace in the sense that, for once, I wasn't bracing to fix someone else's chaos. I was simply moving forward. I found my gate and chose a seat with a clear view of the departure screen and my watch, but not a view of the main terminal entrance. I didn't want to risk seeing them. Not yet. Not when everything inside me still felt raw. People around me were doing normal travel things, scrolling through phones, sipping iced coffee, hugging goodbye. A toddler squealed and ran in circles while his mother chased him with a snack pouch. A couple argued quietly about whether they had packed a charger. It was ordinary. And that ordinariness made my situation feel even stranger. Because my life was splitting in two. In one terminal, my family was still excited, still confident, still believing I was the one person who would never stop being useful. In this terminal, I was sitting alone with a boarding pass, waiting to board a flight that represented something I hadn't let myself have in a long time. Choice. I checked the time. Shardian Arsha Arfin. My boarding started at 12:58. Their flight left at 3:10. They would probably arrive at the airport around 12:30 or 12:40, since Logan insisted on being early. They would check in, drop bags, take photos, complain about the line, and then head to their gate. And then they would try to pull up their boarding passes. And then reality would hit. My phone buzzed. A message from Emma. "Security line is insane, LOL. I'm nervous. Wish you were here. This feels weird without you." My chest tightened. Emma's message didn't sound like Logan's. It didn't sound like my parents'. It sounded like a girl who didn't know how to say what she really meant. "This feels wrong. This feels unfair." I typed back slowly. "You'll be okay. Take lots of pictures. Try a real croissant, not the hotel one." Then I hesitated and added, "If anything feels off, step away and text me." It was instinct. Even now, even after everything, I was still trying to protect her. I was still trying to be the safe place. I slid my phone back into my bag and took a deep breath. Then, another notification popped up. The family thread. Logan had posted a photo. It was a screenshot of what he thought was his boarding pass, artfully cropped with a coffee cup and his wristwatch in the corner. The caption read, "Paris, we're coming for you." I stared at it. Then, out of habit, I zoomed in. And that's when I saw it. A small word in the corner. One that made my lips press together so hard I almost laughed. "Standby." Logan hadn't noticed. He hadn't read it. He had just assumed. Because Logan always assumed the world would bend around him. He assumed the tickets were fine because they had always been fine. He assumed the reservation existed because it had always existed. He assumed that even if something went wrong, I would fix it. That assumption had carried him through his entire life. And it had crushed mine. I stared at the word standby until it blurred, then looked away, because I didn't want anyone around me to see the expression on my face. I wasn't smiling. I wasn't crying. I was somewhere in between. At 12:55, the gate agent announced pre-boarding. People started standing up, gathering bags, stretching their legs. The energy shifted. The line began to form. I checked my phone again. Nothing. For a moment, I wondered if Logan had already discovered it. Maybe he was at the counter yelling. Maybe my parents were panicking. Maybe Emma was trying to calm them down. Maybe, just maybe, they were realizing what they had done. But then I remembered something about Logan. Logan didn't realize things until they were unavoidable. He didn't notice warning signs. He noticed humiliation. And humiliation was coming. At 12:58, my boarding group was called. I stood up, rolled my suitcase toward the line, and joined the slow shuffle forward. The jet bridge door was open. The scanner beeped steadily as passengers handed over their boarding passes. Beep, beep, beep. Each sound felt like a countdown. I was 3 people away from the agent when my phone buzzed, then buzzed again, then again. I pulled it out, and my stomach dropped. A message from Logan. Rachel, something is wrong. They can't find our reservation. A second later, another. The lady is saying the tickets were canceled. Did you touch something? Fix this. And then, in all caps, like he was barking at an employee. Fix this now. I stared at the screen. The line moved forward. The agent scanned another boarding pass. Beep. Another. Beep. The jet bridge yawned open like a mouth waiting to swallow me into a different life. My fingers tightened around my phone. And for a split second, my old reflex screamed inside me. Fix it. Call the airline. Log in. Undo. Save them. Save the trip. Save the peace. Save my mother's smile. Save my father's dream. Save Logan from embarrassment. The reflex was so strong I felt dizzy, because I had trained myself for years to respond that way, like a fire alarm, like a dog hearing a whistle. But then another thought rose, quieter but firmer. No, this is the moment. This is the moment where you decide if you're still the person who sacrifices herself to keep everyone else comfortable, or if you're finally going to let the consequences stand. I stepped out of the line and walked to the window, letting 3 people pass me. I stared down at the tarmac, at the service vehicles moving like tiny insects, at the planes lined up like metal promises. My phone buzzed again. This time it was my mom. Rachel, did you change something? The agent is saying the booking is linked to your account. Then my dad. Please call. We're at the counter. We can sort this out. Then Logan again. You think this is funny? I have a client dinner in Paris tomorrow. This is my job. Fix IT. I could almost hear his voice. The way he would be leaning over the counter, jaw tight, eyes furious, looking for someone to blame who wasn't him. And the strangest part? I didn't feel panic. I felt calm. A calm so unfamiliar it scared me. Because it meant something. It meant I had finally stopped being afraid of their disappointment. I looked back at the boarding line. My group was almost done. If I didn't move now, I'd miss my chance. I stared at Logan's message one last time. Fix it. Fix it. Fix it. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel the urge to obey. I felt the urge to breathe. I slid my phone into my bag, gripped my suitcase handle, and stepped back into the line. Because somewhere in the other terminal, my family was discovering what it felt like to lose the person they had treated like she didn't belong. And this time, I wasn't running back. The line moved forward like nothing in the world had changed. That was the surreal part. Around me, people were smiling, adjusting backpacks, checking seat numbers, complaining about legroom. A couple argued softly about whether they'd packed a phone charger. A little boy bounced on his toes, clutching a stuffed dinosaur, squealing every time the scanner beeped. And in my hand, my phone kept vibrating like a living thing. Logan, Mom, Dad. Logan again. All of them demanding, pleading, panicking, while the airport continued its calm choreography as if my family wasn't imploding in a different terminal. I stepped forward, then stopped again. Not because I was afraid. Because I realized something. If I answered Logan first, it would be the same old script. Logan would dominate the story, my parents would follow his lead, and Emma would get swallowed whole by the chaos. And Emma didn't deserve that. Whatever was happening over there, she was the only one who had even tried to see me as a person. So, I turned away from the boarding line and walked quickly toward the nearest corner, where the noise softened near a row of vending machines and a window overlooking the tarmac. My hands were steady, but my chest felt tight. I opened my private thread with Emma. I stared at the empty message box for a full second, trying to find the right words. Not dramatic. Not cruel. Just true. Finally I typed, "Hey, If you're still at the counter, step away for a second if you can. Somewhere you can read this without Logan looking over your shoulder. The three dots appeared almost instantly, then disappeared, then reappeared. A minute passed. It felt like 10. My boarding group was still being called in the distance, the gate agent's voice repeating numbers and letters in a rhythm that suddenly sounded like a countdown to a different life. Then Emma replied, "I'm by the bathrooms. What is going on? Everyone is freaking out. Mom keeps apologizing. Dad is arguing. Logan is yelling. The agent looks like she wants to strangle us." I swallowed hard. Even reading her words, I could picture it perfectly. My mom would be clutching her passport like an apology. My dad would be pulling out printed documents that no longer meant anything. Logan would be leaning over the counter, jaw tight, demanding a manager like the world owed him a solution. And Emma. Emma would be standing slightly behind them, quiet, trapped, watching. I looked at my reflection in the window. A woman with tired eyes and a boarding pass in her bag. A woman who suddenly had the power to decide what kind of sister she was going to be. I typed slowly. They're not wrong about the account. Everything was booked through me. Every confirmation. Every code. My name. My card. Emma's three dots appeared again. Then stopped. Then appeared again. Finally, she wrote, "Rachel, did you do this?" My throat tightened. I could have lied. I could have said it was an airline error. I could have blamed a glitch. I could have saved myself from being the villain in their story. But I was tired of stories. I was tired of letting Logan write them. So I told her the truth. Yes, I canceled the tickets. I paused, then added, "They told me I wasn't welcome. Logan told me not to be at the house when you left. So I made sure I wasn't part of the plan anymore. I kept my ticket. I'm boarding a flight right now, different terminal, different connection, same destination." There was a long silence. No dots. No reply. Just the weight of what I'd said hanging in the air like smoke. In the distance, I heard the gate agent call my boarding group again, more firmly. I glanced back toward the line. It was shorter now. My window was closing. My phone buzzed again, Logan, calling this time. I ignored it. Then my mom. Then my dad. Then Logan again. I ignored them all. Because the only person I needed to hear from in that moment was Emma. Finally, the dots appeared. Then her message came through, short and uneven, like she had typed and deleted and typed again. "Why didn't you tell me?" The question hit me harder than I expected. Because the honest answer was painful. I didn't tell her because I didn't trust her. Not fully. Not anymore. I typed, "Would you have stopped them?" Another long pause. Then she replied, "I don't know." Those 3 words did something inside me. They didn't fix anything. They didn't erase the betrayal. But they were the first honest thing anyone in my family had said to me in a long time. Emma's next message came quickly after, like she couldn't hold it back anymore. "They were awful to you. I didn't say anything. That's on me. I didn't think you would actually do something like this, Ra." I swallowed, my eyes stinging. "Because I hadn't thought so either." "Me neither," I typed back. Not until they made it very clear where they thought I belonged. Emma's reply came softer. "So, what happens now?" I looked toward the gate. The boarding line was almost gone. I could hear the scanner beeping steadily, like a heartbeat. Beep, beep, beep. I typed the truth. Now they deal with the consequences of treating me like I was disposable. And I finally see Paris. I hit send. Then I closed my thread with Emma and opened Logan's messages. His last text glared up at me in all caps. "Fix this now." My thumb hovered over the keyboard. And for a moment, the old version of me flickered back to life. The version who would explain calmly. The version who would apologize for upsetting everyone. The version who would take the blame so my mom didn't have to cry in public. But then I remembered Logan's face at dinner. The way he said, "Immediate crew." The way he told me not to be around. The way he smiled like he was doing me a favor. And I realized something that made my hands stop shaking completely. Logan wasn't texting me like a brother. He was texting me like an employee. Like I was still his assistant. Like my only purpose was to fix his life. So I wrote the message I had been building toward for years. Yes, I canceled the tickets. The refund and credits went back to my card because I paid for them. You told me I wasn't welcome and not to be there when you left. I honored that. You're not my client. I'm not your assistant. You'll have to make your own arrangements. I stared at the message for a second. Then I hit send. The moment I did, my phone rang. Logan. Incoming call. His name flashing across the screen like a threat. I declined. It rang again. Declined. A third time. Declined. Each decline felt like cutting a wire that had been wrapped around my throat for years. The phone buzzed again with a text from him, longer this time, frantic enough that I could almost see his hands flying over the keyboard. You are being insane. This is thousands of dollars. You're ruining mom and dad's dream trip just to make a point. I have a client dinner in Paris tomorrow. This is my job. I will lose this client. My boss will think I'm incompetent. You can fix this. Just do what you always do. Just do what you always do. There it was. The confession. He didn't see me as a sister. He saw me as a function, a service, a safety net, and for the first time, I understood something that felt both heartbreaking and freeing. If I fixed it now, I would be agreeing to my own erasure. I would be telling them that no matter how they treated me, I would still show up to save them. I would be teaching Logan that cruelty had no cost. I would be teaching my parents that silence had no consequences. I would be teaching Emma that neutrality was safe. And I would be teaching myself that my dignity was optional. No, not anymore. The gate agent called final boarding. My heart thumped once. I stepped forward, rolled my suitcase toward the scanner, and handed over my boarding pass. The agent smiled at me politely, completely unaware she was witnessing the most private kind of revolution. The scanner beeped, and that tiny sound felt louder than Logan's shouting messages. Louder than my parents' disappointment. Louder than every time I had swallowed my own anger to keep the peace. I walked down the jet bridge toward the plane. Halfway down, my phone buzzed again inside my bag. I didn't check it. I didn't need to. I already knew what it would say. Fix this. Come back. Do your job. Be the version of Rachel we prefer. But I wasn't that version anymore. When I stepped onto the plane, the air smelled like recycled oxygen and coffee. People were shuffling into rows, lifting bags overhead, finding seats. The flight attendants smiled, like everything was normal. I found my seat an aisle seat, upgraded, a small luxury I had given myself with miles I had earned cleaning up other people's messes. I sat down and exhaled. For the first time all day, my shoulders dropped. I pulled my phone out, stared at it for one last second, then switched it to airplane mode. The screen went quiet. No buzzing, no demands, no accusations, just silence. 10 blessed hours of silence. And as the plane began to taxi, the city of Phoenix sliding past the window, I felt something rise in my chest that I hadn't expected. Not victory, not revenge, relief, because for once in my life, I wasn't fixing anyone else's trip. I was taking my own. And somewhere behind me, in another terminal, my family was learning what it felt like to lose the person they had treated like she didn't belong. And this time, I let them. For the first 30 minutes after takeoff, I didn't do anything. I didn't open a book. I didn't watch a movie. I didn't even put in my headphones. I just sat there with my hands folded in my lap, staring at the seat back in front of me like I was waiting for someone to tap my shoulder and say, "Ma'am, we need you to come with us. There's been a mistake." Because that's what my nervous system was used to. Mistakes. Emergencies. Fixing. Even when I had finally chosen myself, my body still expected punishment. Outside the window, the desert fell away. The sky turned into that soft, endless blue that always makes you feel like you're floating between lives. And for the first time in years, I wasn't managing anyone else's schedule. I wasn't checking in on a client. I wasn't calling an airline rep. I wasn't rearranging someone's itinerary because they forgot their passport. I wasn't apologizing for a problem I didn't cause. I was just sitting. It felt unnatural. Then, slowly, the plane leveled out. The seatbelt sign dinged off. People started shifting, stretching, unwrapping snacks. Normal life resumed around me. And that's when the doubt arrived. It came quietly, like it didn't want to be noticed. It sounded like my mom's voice. Rachel, honey, why would you do this? It sounded like my dad's tired disappointment. You took it too far. It sounded like Logan's rage. You're insane. I pressed my head back against the seat and closed my eyes. Because the truth was, I wasn't sure how I felt. I wasn't celebrating. I wasn't cackling. I wasn't high on revenge. I felt hollow. Like I had finally pulled a splinter out that had been in my skin for years, and now I could see how deep the wound actually was. Revenge doesn't feel clean when it's family. It feels like tearing off a bandage and realizing the bleeding never stopped. A flight attendant walked by with a tray of drinks. I ordered water. When she handed it to me, she smiled and said, "Enjoy Paris." I almost laughed. Not because it was funny, because the phrase sounded like something that belonged to someone else. Someone carefree. Someone who didn't just blow up her family from inside an airport terminal. I sipped the water and stared out the window again. Somewhere down there, my family was still in Phoenix. And I didn't know what their story looked like now. I didn't know if my mom was crying in the car. I didn't know if my dad was furious. I didn't know if Emma was silent. I didn't know if Logan was already spinning his narrative, turning himself into the victim and me into the villain. All I knew was that for the first time in my life, I wasn't there to stop him. I stayed on airplane mode for the full 10 hours. Not because I was being petty, because I needed the distance. Because if I turned my phone on mid-flight and saw my mother's messages, I knew exactly what would happen. My guilt would rise like a tide. My hands would start moving. My brain would start calculating solutions. And I would become Rachel the Fixer again, right there at 37,000 feet. So I stayed quiet. I watched a movie I barely absorbed. I ate a small meal. I dozed for maybe 20 minutes. And in the spaces between, I kept thinking about 19-year-old me. The girl who had given up Paris because she didn't want to upset her family. The girl who had been convinced that wanting something too much was dangerous. The girl who had been taught that her dreams were negotiable. I thought about how strange it was that I was finally going to Paris now. Not with my family's blessing, but with their anger behind me like a storm. And I wondered if this was what adulthood really was. Not getting what you want easily, but getting it anyway, despite everything. When we finally landed, the cabin filled with that restless energy that happens when people smell a new city. Seatbelts clicked. Bags thumped from overhead bins. Voices rose. And then, like a wave, phones came back to life. People around me were already scrolling, texting, posting. I waited. I stood in the aisle with my suitcase and let the line move forward without me. Because I wasn't ready. Not yet. I took a deep breath, then finally turned my phone off airplane mode. The screen exploded. Messages flooded in so fast I couldn't even read them at first. Then I did. From my mom. "I can't believe you would do this to us." Another from my mom. "I thought you were better than this." From my dad. "We are rebooked for tomorrow. It cost a fortune. Your mother is devastated." From my dad again. "This was unnecessary." And then Logan. Not even pretending to be reasonable. "You destroyed my reputation. The client is livid. My boss thinks I'm incompetent. When we get home, we're done. Don't bother coming around anymore." I stared at that last message for a long moment. The old me would have collapsed. The old me would have panicked. The old me would have immediately tried to repair the damage. But instead, I felt something else. Clarity. Because Logan's threat wasn't new. It was just louder than usual. He had been trying to exile me for years. He just finally said it out loud. The line moved slowly toward passport control. People shuffled forward. French and English announcements echoed overhead. The airport smelled like coffee and perfume, and something faintly sterile. I stood there, reading my family's messages, while strangers brushed past me, excited and smiling. And for a moment, I felt like I was walking through two worlds at once. One world where I was finally in Paris, and one world where my family was still trying to pull me back into the role they preferred. My phone buzzed again. Emma. Her name on the screen made my heart jump. I opened it. I told them the truth. I stared at that sentence, my throat tightening. Emma continued. "I told them you booked everything. That they uninvited you after the fact. that Logan told you not to be there. Another message came. Mom cried. Dad just sat there. Another. Logan called you crazy. I told him he's been cruel for years, and this is the first time you ever pushed back. Then, they're still coming tomorrow. Different route. It cost almost double. And finally, Dad is furious at the airline, but he knows it's not their fault. Mom keeps saying we did this. She's right. I pressed my lips together so hard they almost went numb. Because Emma's messages didn't feel like victory. They felt like grief. Grief for the family I had wanted. The one where my parents protected me. The one where Logan didn't get to run the show. The one where Emma didn't have to choose sides. But that family wasn't real. Not the way I had imagined it. I walked through passport control, answered routine questions, collected my luggage, and stepped into the arrivals hall. Paris. The city I had been denied. The city that had lived in my head for 10 years like a promise. And yet, standing there, I didn't feel triumphant. I felt tired. Not jet-lag tired, soul tired. Because now that the chaos had happened, now that the consequences were real, I couldn't pretend anymore. My family wasn't going to suddenly apologize and become kind. They were going to blame me for finally refusing to be mistreated. And I had to decide what kind of relationship I wanted with them going forward. On the train into the city, I watched the French countryside blur past the window. The light was softer here, the buildings older. The world looked like it had history in its bones, and for the first time since the dinner table, I let myself cry. Not loud, not dramatic, just tears sliding down my cheeks while I stared out at fields and rooftops. Because I wasn't crying over the trip. I was crying over the version of my family I had clung to, long after reality had contradicted it. I wiped my face and opened my phone again. I didn't reply to Logan. Not yet. I started with my mom. I typed slowly, choosing each word like it mattered. Mom, I love you. But you told me I wasn't part of this trip. I believed you. I will not apologize for finally believing you. When you're ready to talk about how we got here, not just what I did, I'll be ready. Then my dad. Dad, you have watched Logan belittle me for years and called it jokes or tension. I won't attend family events where I'm everyone's punchline. If you want a relationship with me, it has to be different. I'm not a child you can manage out of the way. I stared at Logan's thread. His last message still glared. Fix this now. I didn't feel rage anymore. I felt something steadier. A boundary. I typed. No. You told me I wasn't welcome. You've mocked my work, my choices, and my life for years. You turned my opportunities into punchlines. This time, the consequences reached you. I won't fix that. I hope you make it to Paris. I hope you sit with what it took to get here. But from now on, if you want me in your life, it won't be on your terms alone. I hit send. The 3 dots appeared. Then vanished. Then appeared again. Then nothing. I locked my phone and leaned my head back against the train seat. Outside the window, Paris was getting closer. And inside me, something was settling into place. Not revenge. Not forgiveness. Just the quiet understanding that my life had changed. Because I had finally done something I'd never done before. I had chosen myself. And when the train finally pulled into the city, I stepped onto the platform, lifted my suitcase, and walked forward into the streets, like a woman writing a new script, one she didn't need anyone's permission to live. Sometimes the biggest revenge isn't loud. It isn't screaming, exposing secrets, or destroying someone in public. Sometimes it's quiet. It's one decision, made in the dark, when you finally realize you've been carrying people who wouldn't carry you back. This story wasn't really about Paris. Paris was just the stage. The real story was about what happens when the fixer in the family stops fixing. When the person who always books the tickets, smooths the tension, and swallows the insults finally says, "No more." And the moment she does, everyone panics not because they lost a trip, but because they lost control over her. If you've ever felt invisible in your own family, if you've ever been treated like you're only valuable when you're useful, I hope this story made you feel seen. Because boundaries aren't cruelty, they're survival. And sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is let people face the consequences of the role they forced you into. Thank you for listening to this chapter. If you want more emotional, unforgettable stories like this, stories that hit hard, heal slowly, and stay with you, please subscribe to Revenge Truth Vault. Your support truly helps this channel grow, and it means more than you know.